So, my next question would be is actually rice planting, and how would someone go about planting rice?
Well, the first thing you got to do is we got to start with soil type. Obviously, if you have high, some high sandy cotton ground or peanut ground, you're not going to want to put rice in very sandy soil because you need to put water on it, and sandy soil is just not going to hold water. If you have a relatively loamy soil, a clay subsoil, something like that, we can talk. I have a list of soil types. I can analyze the soil and see if it would work. Basically, if you can, dike it off and flood it like a duck impoundment. If you can flood it like a duck impoundment, you can plant rice on. You can grow rice on it. Now the issue with a dike, a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to build a big dike around my field like a duck impoundment. Well, you don't have to. If you want to go around that field with a levee plow, that's sufficient. You're only putting, you only have to put a minimum of 3 inches of water. Now we do have varieties of rice, and we were talking about this earlier off camera, how Carolina Gold will grow in pretty deep water, so the field doesn't have to be perfectly level. However, if you need to levee off your contours, and that's if as your field drops, just like they do in Arkansas, they levee off for every so many inches of drop in the field contour. They put down another levee cross field. So what I do is I go all the way around the field with a perimeter levee, and then for so many inches of drop, I run that levee plow and dike it off, and then we flood from the top down and overflows down to the bottom.
Right.
Which makes it a lot easier because you can go over with a set of discs and knock that levee over if you want to rotate into another crop the next year. It's only 20 inch high levee.
Right.
18. It'll settle throughout the season. It'll start to settle some. So it doesn't take a huge investment to start rice farming, other than a pump or some type of water source. You got to have that. So you're going to have a well or some kind of a water source close by to pump from. A reliable water source. We don't want to pump from a creek that dries up every summer. You got to have water throughout the summer.
Right.
So, you want a reliable water source to pump from or a well. And from there, if you've got relatively good water holding capability, then you're in business. You've got the building blocks of farming rice. I think a lot of people are scared to farm rice because they don't want to get out of their rotation. They have a rotation that they go year to year. They don't want to break that rotation. My suggestion to anyone, and this was advice that was given to me by people who know a lot more than I do, is that when you start rice farming, don't do more than 5 acres. Well, I did 14 acres my first year, but anyway, if whatever you're equipped to handle, I'll put it like that. If you have the equipment, you have an established farm, you've got all the equipment there. Do 10 acres. What's it going to kill you to cut out 10 acres of your field and then find out that, man, this stuff is making me more money than cotton?
Right.
Because I've been told by a lot of people, you'll lose your rear end on cotton. Well, I'm like, I didn't even think about growing cotton, corn, soybeans, or any of that stuff. Rice was it. And so I want to help people realize what I've realized about growing rice.
Right.
And I'm willing to go out and put boots on the ground, give advice from the knowledge that I've received or that I've, obtained throughout these years. And I can find you some answers from people that know a lot more than even I do. So I'm willing to put boots on the ground to help people establish rice farming on their farm. When it comes to growing rice, you just drill it in like you do wheat or oats.
A typical drill is
7.5 inch spacing, grain drill.
Yep, grain drill.
Put it down. I put down Carolina Gold this year at 80 pounds an acre, just to compensate for bird predation.
Okay.
And so I'm probably actually putting down about 70 pounds an acre.
Okay.
And on 7.5 inch row spacing, You drill it in. It gets up about a foot or more high in about 30 days or so, 30, 40 days. And you do the necessary things like you have to do with other crops. If you want to do your post-emergent, pre-emergent, your fertilization, all that stuff, it's pretty much the same as everything else. There may be a few details, and that's where I'd be willing to help someone as far as advice on when and what to do. But you let it get up about 12 plus inches, and then you put water on it.
Right.
And in my experience with Carolina Gold, it actually grows in a lot deeper water than your conventional varieties, because a lot of your conventional varieties, when I say conventional, I mean like modern hybrid varieties, not to be confused with GMO. There's no GMO rice. So anybody that's got any qualms about GMO, there's no such thing yet as GMO rice. It's hybridized. They've bred these different varieties of rice in labs to benefit humanity, basically. Is with it. The huge rice farming operations in other states are there to feed the masses. Their rice is generally shorter than what I grow, and it's been bred to be beneficial from the time it's planted all the way through to the time it's put in the bag and sent to the grocery store. From disease resistance, fungal resistance, threshing when it goes through the combine, how easy does it thresh? Less vegetative material because it's shorter. Goes through the combine, all the way through the process from the plant. That when they run it through the polisher. By the way, brown rice and white rice are the same thing.
Oh, really?
A lot of people don't know that. Brown rice is white rice that has not gone through the polisher. When you take rice out of the hull, it's brown rice. And it has a bran layer. Everybody knows what rice bran is. Well, there's a brown, tannish colored bran layer on it. The rice goes through a polisher that gets the bran layer off. The bran comes off in kind of a dust form. It's vacuumed out of the system as it's going through. And then on the other end, it comes out as white rice, which is what we all like to eat with gravy on top of it.
Right.
So,
fried pork chop.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah.
Gotta have fried pork chop.
So, the bran is then sold and put in everything from dog food to granola bars to breakfast cereal. And the bran layer is actually where a lot of the nutrients are. That's why when you look at a bag of white rice, it's been fortified because the government requires them to put those nutrients back in that in some way, so you're not eating just pure carbohydrates.
Other than health benefits, but as far as a farmer, there's a lot for him. I mean, if a farmer, I'm not saying goes over from corn or tobacco or anything else to rice, but actually plants rice, there's a lot of usage for rice more so than, say, corn. Yes. I mean, corn, you're going to get feed, food, and fallow. I mean, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So,
well, with growing rice from a waterfowl aspect, it's highly beneficial. The rice, once it is obviously rice is ducks like rice. That's a no-brainer. They've actually found through research that when Texas on the Gulf Coast started reducing acreage, I think in the late 80s, 90s, they started reducing acreage, and Arkansas started increasing acreage. That the speckle belly population followed the increasing acreage to Arkansas. Their speckle belly population, migrating population, decreased in Texas and increased in Arkansas. So mankind does have within his ability to affect the migration of waterfowl. And that's obvious, and we could go into a lot of other points that argue that also. But
I think I did a video on that a while back.
Yeah. So, but as far as the farmer, yes, it's very beneficial. But for waterfowl, it's highly beneficial because when you put water on a field during the summer, there are a long list of bugs and invertebrates and everything that is growing in that water. Now you slowly recede that water, and then you dry the field. You have to be able to plant dry and harvest dry.
Right.
Okay. Those are two key things. You got to have a water source. You got to have soil that's relatively, hold that water. within a reasonable amount. You're going to have to keep putting water on there. It's not like a one and done thing. But you have to plant dry, flood, drain off, and harvest dry. Then, right after you harvest, it's up to your someone's discretion. But you flood sometime after harvest. If you want to wait till later to flood it, that's fine, whatever. Because that seed will sprout in warm water. So if you want to wait till later. But here's what happens.
The leftover seed.
The leftover seed,
right.
the waste grain.
Waste grain.
But here's something else that happens. Right after you harvest, the rice plant itself, not waste grain seed resprouting, the rice plant itself will begin to grow again. Just like the grass you have to cut every week in your yard. By the way, you have a beautiful yard.
Well, thank you.
You ought to get yard of the month. Man. Everybody out there, this guy has got a beautiful yard. Made me embarrassed. But anyway, it's just like the highway grass out in your yard, Bahia grass. You cut that down, and within a week, that grass is growing again. It already has a seed head on it. Rice, when you cut it, within a week and a half, new seed heads are sprouting up. That's called the ratoon crop. You go in there with a low dose of nitrogen fertilizer and spread it over that ratoon crop. You get 1/3 the yield of your original crop. And by November 1st, you have 1/3 of what you've already cut growing and sitting there again in that field.
Which,
along with waste grain.
Which is beneficial to the ducks.
Which is beneficial to the ducks. But here's the other thing that's beneficial to the ducks. You have all that rotting straw in that water that produces an invertebrate explosion. All that straw, once you flood it, when it starts to decay, it provides food and a place for invertebrates to just flourish. So you have the ratoon crop, you have some waste grain, and you have the invertebrate explosion that occurs. Another thing about rice is that just because it sprouts doesn't mean the ducks won't eat it. If I have to plant extra in the springtime to compensate for bird predation, blackbirds and boat-tailed grackles and the like will come out here and pluck the sprout out of the ground and eat the remnant seed that's attached to the little baby root trying to establish itself. Ducks will do the same thing. A hungry duck will eat. They're going to eat.
Right.
So it is highly beneficial for waterfowl to plant rice. If you want, I'll also give you another, and I'll show you where this happened when we go to the field. I was driving along one day, and I didn't realize just how beneficial it was. I was watching a henwood duck and a bunch of little ones. She probably had about 10 little ones just crowded around her. And as I pulled up along the dike, she flew about 15 yards and landed in the rice. Well, all her little ones darted in that rice, and the rice was this high over the water and just as thick and dense. And I said, if I was a baby duck, that's where I'd want to be. Mm-hmm. There's no hawk going to drop down in. If mama duck sees a hawk, she's going to head into that rice, and those little ones are going to go right with her. And there is no hawk that's going to drop in and dive bomb blindly into the
rice, not knowing what's there.
Rice that's anywhere from 12 inches to 2-3 feet over the water. Right. So that's another aspect. It provides shelter. Wading birds responded 2 days after we flooded the field. There were wading birds everywhere out there, eating all the bugs that emerge out of that soil, looking for a dry place.
Yeah.
And little frogs and stuff. Oh, the frogs and the millions and millions of frogs. It's just unbelievable. I just can't say enough about the benefits of growing rice over other crops if you're interested in waterfowl. And the thing is that I have a farm co-op agreement with a landowner that I won't mention on camera, but I have a farm co-op agreement, and I leave 20% of the crop in the field for the ducks, or I come back and fertilize right after I cut, so the ratoon crop comes up strong.
Right.
We had about a 30 acre field last year. It was like 20, almost 29. It was like 28 point something. I just rounded up to 30. It was about a 30 acre field last year. Between Christmas and New Year's, as poor as the weather was for ducks last year, on a 30 acre field, we counted an estimate of about 3,000 ducks on a 30 acre field. And that was just a ratoon crop and waste grain and straw. Rotting straw producing invertebrates. About 2,500 of them were teal. The balance of the remaining 500 or so ducks were what we call big ducks. You know, black ducks, mallards,
Right. Pintail widgeon.
pintails, widgeon. You know, all the way down the list. Shovelers. Shovelers
Right.
love to get in there and sift out all
Sift
those
out
invertebrates
everything, yeah.
between that rotting straw. Can't leave out a good old shoveler.
No, and you know what? You know, a shoveler eats the same thing as a mallard eats, and they don't taste that bad. They just look funny. That's all. They just look funny.
Just throw some extra garlic on it. Let it some
That's
Tommy
right.
Chachere's on there and let it ride.
That's right.
Throw it on the grill.
So Ty, we've been talking about a lot about, I guess, the more bigger farmers. Let's say a guy's got, you know, 2 to 10 acres, 2 acres to 10 acres. He doesn't have the heavy equipment that a farmer would have. I mean, he's got a 4-wheeler and a 4-wheeler disc, maybe a spreader. You know, can he still plant rice just using bare equipment like that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you talk about it a little bit?
Now, when we talk about that aspect of growing rice in farming, sometimes we're talking about apples to oranges. Okay, so some of the things that I say when you talk about more of a recreational aspect of growing rice, sometimes it doesn't apply. Like I really have to put a lot of focus on, you know, my weed pressure, fertilization, timing, that kind of stuff. Because I want to produce the highest yield, obviously, because that's what pays the bills.
Right.
If you're growing it for ducks, solely for growing it for ducks, the pressure's not there so much, because you're not, you know, trying to pay the bills. You want to shoot some ducks.
Right.
So what you would do in that aspect of growing rice is that you could use a spreader on a 4-wheeler. Rice is very versatile as far as you can grow it on dry ground as long as you keep a decent amount of moisture in the soil. It is not drought tolerant at all. Don't even try it. You want to, if you got a spot, let's say you got a spot in a field that stays fairly wet, you're planting corn or something like that, and you want to flood it, you got a wet spot that you know is going to drown your corn, might be a good option to put some rice in that hole.
Okay.
Because of the fact that why not utilize that spot? If you know it's low, put some rice in there.
Right.
And grow it. Beaver pond, something like that. You can broadcast spread it, and you know, tie a couple pallets behind the 4-wheeler and drag them around.
Yeah.
On dry. If you're doing it wet, you can actually put rice in. I wouldn't recommend over 6 inches of water. For those purposes, farming, I'd never go as deep as 6 inches. But if you're sowing it in water, you can do that. But don't try not to go over 6 inches for the most part, because rice will sprout through water. It'll grow. As a general rule, rice will grow through soil or water, but not both. So don't drag over it and then flood it.
Right.
Okay. Don't flood it or don't spread it in water and then drag over it.
Right.
Okay. Because that seedling has to go through a lot to get through 6 inches of water, and it will, but don't overburden it.
But I mean, the overall picture is you're gonna need water. You gotta have a water source.
You gotta have water.
You gotta have a water source.
You gotta have soil that is pretty moist. To say it's fairly moist. You know.
I mean, as far as
you don't want it to get dusty in there.
Right. And if you're harvesting, I mean, we're talking again, like you said, apples to oranges. Yeah. You know, if we're talking about harvesting rice for a profit, then you need a little bit better equipment, that kind of thing.
I mean,
But if a guy is just wanting to grow some rice,
well, not just that. It's the fertilizer application. You know, I put anywhere from 120 to 150 plus pounds of nitrogen. That's not units. That's pounds of nitrogen. Your units is going to be up. If you're going by units, it's going to be over 200 on up. But I put 120 to 150 pounds plus of nitrogen. If you're growing it, and I order, just for instance, my herbicides cost
Ooh.
A lot. A lot, because
Yeah.
they're rice specific. A lot of them are rice specific herbicides that don't go in water. They go on dry ground. They don't go into water. But for someone growing it for ducks, you don't have to put that kind of investment into it. As a matter of fact, some of the weeds are actually good.
Right.
Barnyard grass is a very highly competitive weed with rice. But barnyard grass in a duck impoundment is not a bad deal.
Right.
You got smartweed, stuff like that. It's a smartweed. I love smartweed. Not a bad deal if you got it. Now you don't want it completely overtake the rice.
Correct.
But if you got a patch of it here and patch of it there, it's offering the ducks a little smorgasbord, which is not bad.
And I think we're going to get into that a little bit later as far as the moist soil applications. But I was just trying to figure out if a guy, let's say he has a small duck impoundment. So he's got a water source, and he's just looking to try something different other than the typical corn, drilling corn in.
Mm-hmm.
And, and they don't harvest this corn. This corn's not this
Right.
is solely for the ducks.
Right.
But if he's got a little duck impoundment and he wants to get some rice in there, I mean, he can get it in utilizing a 4-wheel.
Right.
Now, harvesting will be a little bit different,
Right.
I understand, and I understand some other applications, herbicides and fertilizer and all that.
Now, if you're harvesting, like I said, it's got to be dry when you plant
Right.
for equipment purposes. It's got to be flooded during the summer. If you're farming it, it's got to be flooded during the summer. And then when it's ready, you got to be able to drain it, which you got to drain it ahead of time. Let the soil dry out so you can get equipment in there to cut it. For ducks, not so much. You can get a 4-wheeler in some pretty nasty conditions. If you have an issue with weeds like Sesbania, coffee weed, that stuff can get high, really thick, and completely shade out your rice and take it over. If you see Sesbania coming up, you can, before you flood, you can hit it with 2,4-D. It'll kill Sesbania. At the recommended rate, do your reading. Read. Do not go in there and dump a 2.5 gallon thing of 2,4-D from Tractor Supply and spread it on an acre of rice. You will kill your rice.
Yeah.
Read the recommended rate for rice, even if it looks like it's not doing anything. Give it time and let it do its work.
Sounds like somebody from experience.
Yeah, well, no, I know, well, I do, because like even with some of the stuff that I get is not, this is no slouch stuff that I use. It's the good stuff. I don't go cheap.
Right.
And even with that, if you turn around in the field and overlap, you can see it affected that area because you put twice the dosage on it.
Oh, then you're supposed to.
Then you're supposed to, and it's real deal stuff. So don't go through all the work and then not read and then screw up your rice. I have people calling me about beaver ponds and impoundments. They have problems with flooding. They have issues, and they're like, we're sick and tired of having our crops get annihilated by too much rain, which we seem to be getting a lot of, especially on the coastal areas. What can we do? And I'm like, well, this is what you do. And I'm giving them the same advice I'm telling you
Right.
on camera, is that broadcast spread, I would not go cheap. Do your broadcast spreading at no less than 100 pounds per acre. Broadcast spreading. If you're drilling it, do it at 70 or 80 pounds per acre. If you want to broadcast spread it, I'd go no less than 100, but I'd probably go up to 120.
Right.
Spread it, let it come in, get you some fertilizer. When it gets up about 12 to 16 inches tall, go in there, put down some, at plant, put you down some 10-10-10. Put you a couple bags of 10-10-10 at plant. When you go in there before you flood, put you some 34-aught on that thing, and calculate it. You got 34% of that 50-pound bag is nitrogen, 34%. So it's about 17.5 pounds of a 50-pound bag is the nitrogen. Go in there and put you 100 pounds per acre of fertilizer, of nitrogen.
Nitrogen.
So it's I think it's like 6 bags per acre. I think that's right. About 6 bags per acre, something like that, of 3400. Put that down before you flood, and then flood it. And it'll grow like nobody's business. Watch your weed pressure from tall stuff like Sesbania. Don't worry about the grasses you're planting for ducks.
No, that's typically
Yeah.
just planting for ducks. Now, one last question. Let's say a guy does want to start planting rice for a profit. Me, I'm not a farmer. I don't claim to be a farmer. I don't play one on YouTube. So when would I need to start putting my rice in the ground? What time of year?
As early as possible. So what that means is, and it depends on what region you're in. My buyer is up near Darlington. He puts his in around May 1st, I believe. I try to get it in as early as possible. We're a little bit closer to the coast, which makes a big difference. People don't realize that. I put mine in as early as the rain will let me. You tend to have cooler temperatures in March. Soil dries slower, so you're kind of waiting on nature to do its thing. This year I put it in April the 11th was my plant date. Last year, because of rain conditions, I didn't get it in until April the 25th, but it was all good.
And typically, how long does it take to grow before you can actually harvest the rice for, like I said, this is all for the profit guy, the guys that are looking at trying to make some profit or, that kind of thing.
Well, I'll give you, it depends on the variety. The Chinese black rice I started with, I also grew something called Jefferson Scarlet, which I have about around 600 pounds of that can be planted. I kept it. I didn't plant it this year, but I got it stored. I probably got around 1,000 pounds of black rice that's stored, but it depends on variety. The Chinese black rice, the Jefferson Scarlet rice, which is another very old heirloom that was grown by Thomas Jefferson, early August to mid-August, depending on when you got it planted. Carolina Gold, you're looking at early September.
And just for everybody to know, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but just letting everybody know, this is July 20th that we're doing this show, and so in less than 2 months, you're going to be harvesting some of your.
Absolutely.
You're going to be harvesting some stuff.
Yeah, we're looking at probably in the neighborhood between 250 to 300,000 pounds of rice this year. I won't tell you what I'm getting for that rice, but we're looking at 250 to 300,000 pounds of rice.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, that's.
I mean, really. I mean, because when I think of rice, I grew up in the state. I know where some rice fields are. I know about a little bit about, not as much as you do about the history, but I know some of the history of rice. But I still, in my mind, when I think rice, I'm thinking Stuttgart, Arkansas. I'm thinking Harrisburg in northeastern Arkansas. I'm thinking of Louisiana. Some places in Texas. I just don't think about, and I don't think anybody else does. We just don't think about South Carolina because it's been gone for so long, and had it still been here, I truly believe we could have seen.
Oh, it'd be unreal.
A little bit of difference.
People would be coming here.
Yeah, people would be coming here to shoot ducks.
They'd be coming here to
like
shoot
they
ducks.
did, like they did in the 70s.
Yeah.
In the 1970s, here in South Carolina, I know guys that are from Arkansas that would come here to hunt ducks in places that you may even be Pocalla Swamp, up between Manning and Sumter. They'd be coming here to shoot black ducks, and
they'd be filming duck hunting videos in South Carolina if rice was still growing.
I'd be the duck commander instead of the guy in Louisiana. But anyway,
I don't know. He's got some.
He's got his things.
He did his duck. He did it on duck calls.
Yes,
but anyway,
okay.
So when it comes to farming rice, one of the goals of this company is to reestablish the rice industry in South Carolina. And I am willing, personally, to come to anybody's field that wants to talk rice. I'm willing to come and help them, from showing them how to access USDA soil maps, to analyze their sit down and analyze their soil with them, walk their field. I'm a boots on the ground kind of guy. I'd rather talk to you in face than on the phone about the different nuances of growing
Right,
rice.
right.
And so I'd rather be out there walking your field with you anyway. So I'm willing to help anybody get the basic building blocks under their feet to grow rice, because that's what I'm about, is promoting the rice industry in South
In
Carolina.
South Carolina.
Because rice belongs in South Carolina.
All right. Hey, listen, thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hey guys, this is part 2. This was part 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Take 12. Hey guys, this was part 2 of rice in South Carolina, and we were talking with Ty about planting rice and a few other things. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do me a favor. If you haven't, go ahead and subscribe. Comment down below. Give me that big old thumbs up. Hit that notification bell. You know the drill. Anyway, I'm Matt, and we'll see y'all next time on Daddy Duck 365.